You are listening to the Cattle Call podcast. This is the place where computer-aided design and drafting meets humor and practicality, with a touch of business acumen thrown in for fun. Jim and Rocco, the owners of Zentech Consultants, the premier U.S. technology consulting firm for architecture, engineering, construction, and manufacturing, discuss the fascinating world of CAD with some humor and some honesty. The Cattle Call podcast. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Cattle Call podcast with Jim and Rocco from Zentech Consultants. I am Jim, your charming and loquacious host, and with me is my partner,
the better looking one. It's Rocco.
Okay, the delusional one is here today.
They know. They know the truth.
Listen, they know that's why they keep us on podcast and not on videos. Neither of us is making it to the, we just ain't at that movie star level, brother. Maybe if either of us had hair, that might help, but it is what it is.
There was a guy on Jeopardy the other night. He had a mohawk.
Oh, there you go. Mohawk. Hey, listen, if I could grow a purple mohawk, I'd have one. I'd be a happy guy. I'll take it. I miss my hair. So, all right. So what are we talking about today? Oh, I know what we're doing today. So what I want to do is I wanted to talk about BIM today, right? Common topic. We've talked about it a bunch of times before, but I want to get back into it today. And, and for those of you who might not know in this day and age, right? BIM is Building Information Modeling. And what I really want to talk about, I want to start with talking about what it is and what it isn't, right? And how to best integrate it into both your design and, more importantly, I think, into your build, into the actual construction side. And for starters, I want to make sure that all of our listeners understand the difference between 3D modeling and BIM, right? I think that most folks tend to think that they're the same thing, but they're really not. And I understand the confusion, right? Because very often they do come packaged together. 3D models are just an ideal carrier for BIM information. But each of those items are separate and independent entities, even though it's really really common for them to come bundled in one package. And I tell people, think of it like this. It's like driving a car to your friend's house. Right? You and the car, you both show up at the same time, right? But you're individual items, right? Even though you showed up together. Right? You're the BIM in this scenario, right? You're getting out of the car. The car is just a carrier. That's what the 3D model is. Right? BIM's a passenger, modeling is the car. And the logical place to store BIM data, right, is in the item in your design that it actually refers to, right? It makes perfect sense, right? To put the fire rating of a wall on the actual model wall itself, right? But the thing that we need to understand here is that, BIM data can be separated from its model entirely and still be a valid and important aspect of the design build process. And what it really comes down to, I guess, is it's the formal level of development, right? What we refer to as the LOD. The LOD that the information is being built for, and different LODs require different amounts of visual or modeled information, right? And some of these LODs don't have any related graphics at all. And the LOD levels are numbered, 100 through 500, and they have different requirements, both graphically and data related. And I think the confusion in this BIM area between the models and the BIM that hits most of us is that we tend to see here in the construction world, we usually receive and see BIM information only at the LOD 350 level, right, which is the standard for construction documentation. And don't worry, I'm going to talk about the LODs and what they are in just a little bit. But we get that bundled as part of the 3D model because that's a requirement for construction. And that's all we ever see. So they're always integrated together, and we tend to confuse the fact that they are separate. So Rocco, do you find that most of the people that you talk to, are they comfortable with the idea of the LODs and what they mean, or are they still thinking that the 3D model and BIM are the same thing?
Yeah, I don't know if it's because of the, a lot of times I'm talking to people at the entry level stage, but LODs don't come up. It's always, it's so, and we're going to get into this in more depth, right? But it's always you know, we've been doing 2D forever, and we need to get into BIM, and we need to get into Revit. Those are where most of my discussions are held. It's not really at or around the LOD discussion.
Yeah, sorry about that. Didn't mean to cough in your ear there. Just kind of came out of nowhere. But yeah, I mean, it is kind of a funny thing. I'm so sorry. Excuse me for one moment.
You okay there, Jim? Are you falling apart on us?
Ah, man, I'm dying. I'm telling you, had to hit the mute button there. I was like, ooh, suddenly coughing. I apologize, folks.
Have a beer.
Have a beer. Yeah, see, if I had a beer, I wouldn't be coughing. I'd be smiling and laughing, or at least sleeping. One or the other. I don't know which anymore. So I'm too old to get crazy. More than one beer and I'm snoozing. So, yeah. So no, it is actually kind of funny, man. Your point is real valid, right? That a lot of folks just they're like, oh, we want BIM. We need to get into the BIM, and the concept is it's like talking to your grandparents the first time they want to get onto the internet, right? And they're like, we want to use the Googles. Teach us how to use the Googles. It's like that's not really what it is. It's the same kind of concept. But let's talk a little bit more about the LODs, right? Just to kind of get an idea of what each one of them is. So we're going to start at the base one, right, which is the LOD level 100, and very often it's referred to as conceptual BIM. And usually it uses only 2D symbology, right, and maybe some rough 3D massing elements just to show where how things are going to tie together, with very basic BIM information relating to approximate sizes and materials. Right, it's very basic. It's what you'll see in the initial stages of a design. From there, we're going to move up to LOD 200. Right, it kind of goes in these 100-step increments, and LOD 200 is what we call the approximate BIM. And the graphics can be a blend of both 2D and 3D. And the BIM data at this level is usually a little bit more reliable and planned out, right? For example, a door size and location it's likely correct at this stage, right? And its fire rating is probably accurate at that point, right? And then there's a bit of a blend, right? And here's where we're going to get into the next two, right, which are LOD 3 and 350. Right, 350 is kind of the oddball there. It came in later as it got a little bit more refined. And this is what we term the constructible BIM, right? And it's the one we most often see in the construction world. And this is where the model is usually, fully three-dimensional, right, with all the BIM details for each component being well defined, right? Things like, the make, the model, the color, the ratings, etc. for individual buildable objects are fully designed and ready for construction, right? And I say on the construction side, this is where we usually get into those. And we see the blend of that and LOD 350, which is really similar, right? But 350 takes it one step further in that it takes those individual objects that are fully designed and it includes the connections and the crossovers between different systems. In other words, LOD 350 will include things like wall penetration details and connection details between the HVAC and the electrical control wiring, or connections on how to do steel beam to girder connections, things like that, right? It gets more into the connection and how those things are actually built. So it's very much like LOD 300, but it's a step higher. Okay. And like I said, those are the levels that most of us in the construction world are almost always going to get because those are being prepared for the build. Okay, but there are actually two more levels that go beyond that, and the next one is the LOD 400, and this is what we call fabrication level BIM, and there's usually a lot more focus on the BIM here than the 3D model, and in fact, the model in some cases can be left out entirely. You no longer need the actual 3D model. What LOD 400 is giving the detailed sizes, dimensions, materials, component connection ports that you need to build objects, right? Things like casework and windows and doors, right? Things of that nature, right? The things they're going to do in the factory, right? So the 3D model isn't really important at that level at all, other than as a reference, right? So in a lot of cases, they leave it out and just give that BIM data to the manufacturer, right? So it's LOD 400. And really the last LOD level is LOD 500, as you would have guessed. And it's probably the one that's used the least. And this is the as-built level, right? Where every item, connection, yeah, and full BIM data for every single component is set to correspond to real-world locations and installation parameters, right? You guys may have heard this, referred to as digital twinning, right? It's where we're building the actual building to every, to the greatest level of detail we can in the digital world. And this can use the 3D models extensively, but it can also be output in another way, right? As strictly text-based data, right? For record, right? And facilities maintenance and O&M control of the building life cycle, excuse me, within a building management system, right? So you can export just the data to import into your, whatever ERP type of building management system you're working with there. Rocco, do you find that most people are comfortable staying within that LOD 3 to 350 range? Or are there clients that you work with who see the benefit, right, of moving beyond that to offer more value kind of to the project owners at the end with higher levels of BIM?
I think it depends on the. I think the larger the firm, the more they've been using BIM, the more they get into these higher levels. I don't think that your average, let's say, smaller firm, individual architect is working at that higher level of LODs. Is that a fair statement
No, I think
from your end?
no, I think it's a really fair statement. I think you're right, right? It's like anything else. There's a learning curve. You're not gonna, you know, you're not gonna jump into Formula One racing when you don't have a driver's license. You know what I mean? You have to
Right.
start with the smaller, steps and work your way up to that, learning what all the different components are and how BIM works at the different levels of development. Before you really can provide anything that's effective at those higher levels. So, yeah, I think it's a real good point. Um, all right, so one of the biggest struggles I think we see on the construction side of the house is getting field personnel, right? Our project managers, our superintendents, guys like that, to actually be able to access and make use of the BIM data, right, rather than just the 3D modeling. And look, I get it. It's taken years for us to get them to use the models for interference checking and verifying item locations and so on. The truth is, construction folks aren't always the most tech savvy people. They're experts at building things, not necessarily using CAD and BIM software. The next step is, to my mind, you're at the more important one, right? Which is getting them to use the actual BIM data, right? Getting to the information, on our imaginary doors fire rating, right? What's the lock set type, the hardware type, what's the swing direction, what finish is it? Those are really important things, especially if you have any kind of a question, or if the scheduling isn't readily available, or if you're missing the page or the pages with that data from your construction document set. And I think a key step to resolving that issue comes down to the ease of use of the software and the files that are being used to deliver the BIM data to the construction personnel. A number of very popular BIM systems in the design world are proprietary, right? It means that to access their data, the builder has to have the same exact software as the designer, and you need to understand how to use that specific BIM system. And really, the problem is that those systems are built for designers, right? And not just designers, but like Rocco was saying earlier, designers with extensive training and a design background, right? And they're not really geared out for a construction superintendent to easily work with. And not only that, right? Putting that aside for a minute, but those large 3D BIM modeling packages are really expensive. They cost thousands of dollars per annual license, and their file sizes are huge. They're just prohibitive in trying to access them, right? You just can't get to that info on a tablet or a phone when you're 12 stories up on a new high rise, right? Now, the good thing is that the industry is actively working on developing new software and systems of delivery that will address these issues. And when we come back after a quick break, I want to talk about some of those systems and processes. So stay tuned, folks. We'll be back in just a minute with more of the Cattle Call Podcast. Hello, everybody. This is Jim and Rocco with ZenTech Consultants, and we wanted to talk to you today about Bluebeam Review, the premier quantity takeoff estimating and markup software for PDF out there on the market today. And at ZenTech, we are a premier Bluebeam partner here in the U.S. We're here to help you guys with all your Bluebeam needs, from software sales to training, consulting, configuration, and everything in between in all things Bluebeam, from the standard version to the extreme version and anything else you might need. So, in terms of Bluebeam, Rocco, how do people reach out to us if they want to start that conversation?
Yeah, just hit up our website, give us a ring, or send us an email, or through Osmosis. That works too.
Osmosis is good.
Yeah, zentechconsultants.net or sales@zentechconsultants.net, or give us a ring, 866-824-4459.
All right, ZenTech Consultants, your home for all of your Bluebeam software needs. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Cattle Call Podcast. We're talking today about accessing kind of BIM data. Right? And one of the things that I pointed out in the first half of the show is that BIM and 3D models are different things, right? And that leads me to a comment that I have to make to my clients all the time, which is that you don't need Revit to work in BIM. Right? Look, Revit is a great 3D modeling and BIM system, and it's really, really nice for designers, but it is absolutely horrible for construction people. Yes, there are tools like Navis, right, that let you access the model from the field and do basic clash detection. But I really feel that the proprietary nature of Revit files means that you have to use Revit itself or another Autodesk product, right, to access the BIM data. Right now, to be completely fair here, the Autodesk, the BIM 360 family of products are working towards addressing that issue. But they still really only work with Revit files, and they require annual licenses for the 360 products as well as Revit. I think they're still too heavily focused in the Revit world on design processes, right? And they aren't simplified enough to allow for construction people to access the data easily, right? Even if they do shell out, right, for all the needed Autodesk products, right, in their 360 suite. I think that there are better third-party systems for developing and working in BIM out there. And I'll talk about a few today, but I think that, unfortunately, in the mind of the construction world, all BIM is being kind of splattered with the same, distasteful paint as Revit in their eyes, right? They're like, I can't do Revit, that's crazy, so I want to do BIM. So Rocco, right, are most folks who need BIM in the construction world still talking to you about Revit or how to access Revit files?
Yeah. It's like I was saying before. I mean, when people think BIM, they think Revit. It's just, we need to get into BIM, and that's, and maybe it's a big, at some level, a good marketing message that Autodesk has done in being able to just, whenever people think of BIM, they think of Autodesk, they think of Revit, but that's what we're saying. It's not always the case.
Yeah, and that's why there's podcasts like this, right? And anybody who's giving you information about different options, I think it's really important for particularly for the construction folks. So look,
yeah, and it's a big cost difference too, right? That's a huge factor.
Yeah,
I mean,
really
let's face it, the core of the construction folks that we work with are small to medium-sized firms, and so it's important to be aware that there are other options beyond just Autodesk and Revit out there.
Yeah, it's a real big thing. So yeah, I mean, I think there are really three keys to a successful BIM system, right? Number one, it has to be easy to use for designers, right? And it has to be easy to access and extract BIM information from for contractors, right? And it also has to be able to integrate with multiple software packages for that access. Luckily, there are a number of newer BIM packages that meet those criteria. Systems like ArchiCAD and Vectorworks and BricsCAD BIM. I think all three of those do a really nice job in simplifying the BIM design process while still leaving the information of the BIM open enough for easy access during the construction phase. And BricsCAD BIM is the one I'm most familiar with since we work with it here at Zentech. And what I like about it from the design side is that the modeling side it's way faster and simpler than what most of us are used to, right? With the packages we're working with today. It works in a standard DWG, right? A standard drawing format. And it does all of its 3D modeling with the industry standard requirement for IGES format, right? For all the 3D modeling. So that means it can just be opened and accessed from nearly any other BIM system. And I really love that it's that native DWG file, right? So it means you can open up and start from what most of us deal with, which is that typical 2D design plan and layout, and we can build the 3D model from that in just a few minutes. I will say I think the best part about BricsCAD BIM, I find it's the ease of adding BIM data, right? And like I said, remember it's a separate thing. We're going to add BIM data to the model, right? So the idea behind this is that instead of having to keep a massive library of specific items, right, and then spend forever trying to find the right door, the right window, the right blah blah blah, right? Which one do I use? Right? BricsCAD has a single tool that'll take your 3D model, and you run this tool. It's called BIMify, and BIMify converts every 3D object in your file to BIM data using AI and a customizable standard to apply the most common BIM information to thousands of items at once. Right? It makes walls into walls, and it takes doors into doors, and windows into windows, and roofs into roofs. It's an absolutely brilliant system that makes the design end of the BIM equation much faster and simpler. Like I said, than what most of us are used to doing now with the bigger name packages. Rocco, what do the clients say on the design side when they see that BIMify tool in BricsCAD for the first time? What's their response to the BIM package overall?
Oh, the BIMify is huge. I mean, there's a lot of, holy crap, or that's just amazing, when they see that in action. We're all about honesty here, right? I mean, we're not, yeah, we sell BricsCAD BIM, and we're happy to work with folks who are interested in BIM, but a lot of times we do run up against, how does BricsCAD BIM compare with, and how does the file exchange work with Revit? So that's probably the biggest barrier that we face.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's about people not wanting to be caught out. Where like you said, Revit is without doubt the number one software out there. It's what all the architects use, and they're looking for something that's easy to just transfer back and forth. And systems like Vectorworks and ArchiCAD and BricsCAD BIM, they can transfer and they can work with the Revit stuff, but it is a multi-step process because Revit is proprietary. It keeps all of its stuff in an Autodesk controlled file type. And that is definitely an issue, and it's something we run up against all the time. It's possible, but not always a one-step thing.
yeah, it's a matter of, there is a workflow, there's a workaround. It's a matter of, whether people want to learn and work through that workflow, and how important is it to save money,
Yeah,
because again, there's a big difference in costs. BricsCAD BIM, you can get as a one-time perpetual license with optional annual maintenance, or you could do it as an annual license, again at a much substantially less expensive rate than Autodesk, whereas than Revit. Whereas with Revit, it's, yeah, you have to pay that annual fee, and what the collection is like almost $3,000 a year per license.
yeah,
So there's a big difference in cost.
yeah, no doubt. All right, so I think the last thing that we need here, what we're talking about today, is the ability to access the BIM data in an effective way while you're out in the field. And I will say that one of the benefits of a system like BricsCAD is that it's affordable enough and easy enough to use that the construction firms can actually buy it and give it to their field staff, give them the actual software. It's memory considerate enough that it'll even run well on a Windows tablet or a lightweight two-in-one. And what's nice there is that BricsCAD has a built-in BIM browser, right, that automatically structures all of that building information modeling data into categories that are really easy for supers and contractors to search through and find, right? Look, are you looking for the specs on a window? Just browse to the Windows category and drill down, right? Or if you're looking for a specific window, you can sort that browser panel by floors and locations instead of by item type with just a single button click, right? And then now it's like, oh, here's everything that's on the third floor in zone 1, right? The other benefit is that you can use most BIM viewers on the market because the data is in that industry standard DWG-IGES, and it's not a proprietary file type. And I think ArchiCAD is also really good about file interoperability. It's very easy to access that from multiple systems, but I do think that their BIM data creation on the design side, it's still a little bit too similar to Revit's. It's really almost the same kind of structure that Revit has in terms of its families and libraries and so on. And I think that Vectorworks, on the other hand, is really good at simplifying the BIM side, right? But they still use some proprietary file types for the BIM data, and the controls, right? And that can limit, the access to the data in the field. You have to have softwares that specifically use the Vectorworks type of files. And I think that that's very, very limiting. Look, I think the key takeaway here, right, from what we talked about today is that all construction companies need to look at tools for effectively accessing BIM in the field, right? And they need to stop running from it, right? And I think, because they think BIM and Revit are the same thing, they don't want to invest that incredible amount of money in Revit and the hours and hours and hours it's going to take to learn Revit. It's not what they do. They're frightened by it, right? But again, BIM and Revit are not the same thing, right? And you can find, better, less expensive, less confusing systems to access and work with that BIM data out there in the field, right? Look, folks, all you need to do is just remember that there's more than one software developer working in this field today, right? So there you go. There's my soapbox for today. And with that, folks, we're going to let you all get back to your busy day. Rocco, say goodbye to the good people.
Goodbye, good people.
There you go, folks. And we will catch you next time on the Cattle Call Podcast. All right, everybody. Today's Cattle Call was brought to you courtesy of Zentech Consultants. That's Rocco and I. Zentech Consultants works with design and manufacturing firms to help our clients purchase and implement the software that they need in these complex industries. We provide a single point of contact for clients to buy, develop, and learn the most vital software systems for your specific needs. Zentech strives to be your trusted technology partner from your initial needs all the way through long-term support and training for your entire staff. So Rocco, why don't you tell them how to reach out to Zentech?
All right, yeah, you can reach out to us through zentechconsultants.net. You can email us at sales@zentechconsultants.net, or you can even call us 866-824-4459.
Excellent. We look forward to hearing from you all.